Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the 210 Footwear Foundation's Wi-Fi Lunch and Learn series. My name is Erica Norton, and I am the Associate Director of Marketing for the Women in Footwear program at 210. We have a great Lunch and Learn hour planned for you today on the topic of sustainability and the importance of ethical footwear manufacturing with our guest speaker, Sara Irvani, who is the CEO of footwear brands Okabashi, Oka-B, and Third Oak. A quick note before we get started in regards to our Lunch and Learn format, I'd like to draw your attention to the chat box or the chat blurb bubble on your screen of the WebEx portal. We'll be doing a Q&A in the last 10 or so minutes of our presentation today, but as we go, I would encourage you to type your questions as Sara is speaking, rather than having you unmute yourselves and ask your questions over the phone. This will be an easier way. You may feel more comfortable asking your questions this way. So before I turn things over to Sara, I just want to give a brief overview of the 210 Footwear Foundation. So here are the four most important facts to remember. 210 provides financial assistance, educational scholarships, and professional programs for everyone who works in the U.S. footwear industry. We are fully funded by the footwear industry, and if you ever receive financial assistance from 210, you do not have to pay it back. If you reach out to 210 for help, all of the conversations are 100% confidential. And we are very special in the fact that we are the only industry in the U.S. that has its own foundation. We also have a wonderful program called Wi-Fi, Women in the Footwear Industry. This was started in 2010 or 2011, depending on who you ask. We have 4,000 members across the nation, and we have 10 regional chapters. It's the industry's only national women's organization, and it really connects women in the industry with each other to engage, to network, to be educated, and inspired by each other. We have several ways to get involved, as you'll see, and if for any reason you're not receiving notifications about any of these events, I would urge you to go to 210.org and join up for 210 Connect. This is how you can get information on any and all upcoming events in your area. Lastly, I want to thank our Wi-Fi national sponsors, Wolverine, Caleres, and New Balance, and our trade sponsor, Footwear News. Without you, none of this would be possible, so thank you very much. And now, without further ado, I would like to turn it over to Sara Irvani, the CEO of footwear brands Okabashi, Oka-B, and Third Oak.
Thank you, Erica. Hello, everybody. So I'm Sara Irvani. I'm CEO of Okabashi Brands, and we're proudly one of the remaining 1% of U.S. shoe manufacturers. We are located in Beaufort, Georgia. So while I started in my role as CEO about 18 months ago, the company was actually established in 1984. When we have our three brands, as Erica mentioned. Okabashi, which is for comfort and value, sandals. Oka-B, which is a boutique brand in resorts, and Third Oak, which is sleek and sustainable for the conscious consumer. We also offer contract manufacturing and private label. So to touch on the history of Okabashi, we first need to look at the town of Beaufort, which is about 45 minutes north of Atlanta. Beaufort actually started in the 1870s as one of the major tannery centers in the country, and it then developed footwear, most notably with the Bonner Allen Company. Footwear is very much a part of the town culture here, and there was even a minor league baseball team called the Shoemakers. And that, if you can sort of imagine a 1930s car with the shape of a shoe driving around promoting the local baseball team, sort of quintessential Americana. Over time, the economy evolved and shoemaking became more challenging here. And then in 1981, a big fire wiped out the factory and all of the operations. Meanwhile, in a parallel universe, my grandfather, who had built the largest shoe manufacturing operation in Iran, had his operations nationalized in the revolution. Not because we're at all political, but because that's what happens in revolutions. So, looking around the world and thinking, what can we do now? Shoemaking was something that we knew well, and we were attracted to the US, particularly Beaufort, for its skilled labor, the opportunity of a market, as well as being a logistical center. Only later really did we come to appreciate Southern hospitality, which we now value as much as anyone else. So we started Okabashi Brands in 1984, formerly in a 200-acre woodland that we have that still surrounds the factory. This definitely helps keep sustainability top of mind, driving into a sort of a path of dogwood trees. And of course, you're all welcome to come and visit us. So just moving to the next slide. In the these are some of the images of sort of Beaufort in its heyday, or one version of its heyday. So in the 1990s, the landscape then changed dramatically. There was a large movement towards offshoring. For example, even the buying offices of large US retailers moved to, let's say, Hong Kong. So to sell to a US retailer, we'd have to fly to Hong Kong. We were then and still occasionally now asked, why do you manufacture in the US? And it's quite simple for us. It's really about commitment. We're committed to our community. We're not just a family-owned company, but we're a family-operated and a company, and actually just a family company in and of itself. We have brothers and daughters and fathers and husbands and wives all working together. Many whom have been here with us for over 10 years. Quite a few around the 20-year mark as well. And so this is because we also have a strong culture of internal promotions, and always happy to share stories about how some of our team members who started on third shift quality control are now senior managers within our operation. This is really about having an OSHA compliant environment for the team, which is really should be taken as granted for a US manufacturer in a way that I've come to appreciate isn't always in all operations across the world. We also kept our manufacturing in the US because of our commitment to quality. And this relates to transparency. We know, because we are here and I'm in the factory 4 days a week, that there are no zero mystery materials or chemicals, that we know exactly what goes into the shoe and how is the shoe being made. And our customers know then that they can rely on the made in USA quality. So we committed to stay, and then things got even more challenging. Our raw materials increased within 15 years threefold. Meanwhile, don't we all wish that every time that we had a price increase in our supply chain side, that we could pass it on? But that's not how it works. And so we had to come up with an innovative way of continuing to manufacture in the US and make our commitment a real tangible thing. So we realized that our material was a cost basis for us. We do injection molding. And so we developed a way, and let me just change the slide. Any scraps which are made in the process, or any shoes that don't meet quality control, we're able, and that's sort of an example that you can see on the top left-hand quadrant, are ground up into what you see on the top right-hand quadrant, and then can be made into new shoes. So a given shoe may have about 20-25% of its weight be regrind and be recycled, and that sort of closed loop system means that we're able to keep the high quality bar, and that we also don't have a lot of waste coming out. And just sort of to contrast this, a lot of flip-flops are actually traditionally made like a and I get a bit of stick sometimes for using too many cooking metaphors, but I find it helps, like a roll of dough, and the flip-flop is just stamped out. And all of the excess dough will go to landfills or to the oceans. And then after one season, because by their nature they're disposable, those flip-flops themselves will also end up in the landfill or in the waterways. So this system means that we're able to produce more efficiently, to stay in the US, and then also to be more sustainable. And I think that really comes to my thesis, which is that sustainability really needs to be something that supports your business model, that helps you further to do what you believe in, that it shouldn't be just a superficial add-on for marketing ROI, but there should be something that incentivizes either your company or your brand to continue to do it for the long term, not just to change it as the trends change, because they always will. And just to give you a scale, we grind at the moment about 100,000 pounds. So that's a lot of waste that we are saving and turning into something positive rather than letting it be a negative. So that sort of, I think that the contrast to having something in terms of being a intrinsic model and sustainability helping the business model is greenwashing. And I'm going to talk a little bit more later about how greenwashing impacts the consumer. But greenwashing is, again, just if you say, oh, well, we're sustainable because of some sort of superficial reason and not looking holistically. And I think that is something that's rather dangerous in today's environment. Now, you may think that this is sustainability, ethical footwear manufacturing is not something for everyone, that it's just for companies like Okabashi that take a less usual path, shall we say. And I really don't think that's the case. For example, Farrell Robin realized that they could reduce the churn of workers and improve working conditions in her factories by offering daycare. This is something that means that everyone who works at the factories are more happy, that they're, as a result, then more productive, that they're willing to stay and work with the company for more years, and it fixes a challenge for production. And it shows that if you really look hard about what can we do better, there are always things that you can do, and you can find ways that help your business model intrinsically, and again, are not just for that marketing ROI. So I think every business model can take this approach. So in the 2000s, customers started to ask questions. First, they asked about working conditions, and then the environment, and then the waste, and over time, they've gotten more and more sophisticated. For example, they've gone from sort of seeing an influencer who's perfectly dressed and everyone who has the exact same cheekbones, and now they are really looking for authenticity. And I think that there is also a fatigue of everyone trying to present this perfect self. People want, even with their friends or on social media, and also with brands, for them to be open, definitely to play to their strengths, but to be transparent, and that builds trust and is the key to authenticity that people are looking for. And again, contrasting this greenwashing version of sustainability with really something that's more sustainable as a business model. And when you think about sustainable, what does that really mean? That means something that can go on continuously and into the future. So what we then did is we developed our consumer closed loop system. So we realized that, well, the consumers who we're sending these shoes to, or who are enjoying our shoes, may want to actually participate in this as well, that our values resonate with their values. So after, as you can see in the image to the left, after one of our customers enjoys their shoes, and or maybe they're in New York, like I often am, and don't have a wardrobe big enough to hold all the shoes that we would like. So it's time to find a new home for them. They can send it back, and then they get a discount on a new pair of shoes if they would like to use that. So in that way, we have both closed loop within the factory and within our manufacturing process, but then also a post-consumer closed loop as well. And I think that one thing that's to say is that this is really possible because we're a made in USA company as well, and that our facility is here, and to save that carbon footprint as well as those logistical or inventory hassles of having a satellite center. So I've joined about 18 months ago, and what I really realized is that if you were a straw company in the beginning of 2018, you've had a pretty rocky year if you didn't have a sustainable option within your product offering at the very least. And that's the thing. I think that the push for sustainability, for transparency is going to come like that for straws within footwear. It's going to be a wave. Customers aren't just looking for ethical products in a specific brand, but they're demanding it across the board. And I think that will come to industry by industry. So you need to think, if this wave is coming, how do we make a surfboard? And I think it's there that openness is the key. Openness and transparency doesn't just relate to customers, but it relates to us as businesses and how we can collaborate with each other. How do we know to match our organizational strengths? And sometimes that means taking risks and showing vulnerabilities. We all have strengths and weaknesses. But for example, one thing that's very important to us is pushing forward on the material front. How can we find the most sustainable materials possible? So can we partner with other material suppliers to say, we've got our machines, why don't you come and make up 6 very new and groundbreaking materials, and let's see if they work in footwear. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. Some have, and I mean, even last week we had one explode in our machines and make a terrible mess. So trying and collaborating and pushing the envelope isn't always easy, but I think if you can then find the right partner, you can really make progress, which will benefit you in the long-term side as well. Equally, partnering even with organizations on either a branded or contract manufacturing basis. So how can we connect with where you're going, with where we're going, and how do we find a win-win there? And I think there what's really important is to gauge between a 1-year ROI and a more long-term, ROI, return on investment, and 5-year. And when you look at a lot of companies that have done well, and also family operated or even family-like operated companies in the same way, a company like an Amazon even, being able to invest for the long term, understanding that there's maybe a cost for today, will mean that in the future you'll have your surfboard. You'll be positioned to ride that wave. So really ethical, sustainable, transparent, these don't relate to passive descriptions, but they're really an experience. They're an experience for the customer who thinks that they're voting and who is voting for their, everyone go vote, for the change that they want to see in the world through their process. They're voting with their money and with their actions. And then it also can be transformative for brands and companies who are looking and find a more sustainable business model, whether that's through partnership or on their own basis through their own activities. And considering that, making those changes even before a supplementary marketing ROI. And I think, again, that's just to emphasize that a third time, I think that's really important on authenticity, because consumers can understand and can gauge when sustainability efforts match into a brand story or a company story, or when they sniff them out to say, well, they're only doing this to try and convince me to buy something. And that's not a feeling which moves one to purchase something. So now that I've sort of opened that experiential Pandora's box, I thought that I would touch on some of my experiences so far. And I think that Steve Jobs was right in saying that unrelated learnings can really help you in your career. He's got that famous example of the calligraphy lesson impacting the Apple font. And now learning in my own experience as CEO, I see the benefit of a non-linear career path. Unfortunately, a webinar is not the best sort of forum for a first date question or sort of conversation. Perhaps we can all talk in person another time soon. But just to sort of give you a sense, my literary heroes growing up were probably a combination of Anne of Green Gables and Dagny Taggart from Atlas Shrugged. So a couple of contrasts there. And I grew up following my father as his shadow at work, wandering around the factory as a 7-year-old, really thinking that I was helping, but actually making a really big mess. So hopefully I've stopped making those messes now. And after studying philosophy at UVA, I worked as a strategy consultant advising Fortune 500 companies on innovation. So, for example, one case was that a household brand wanted to create an additional business model generating significant revenue with little investment. So that was the task that our team was given. How do we do that? So this involved a lot of 100-hour weeks. But the benefit there is that when you really push yourself as far as you can go mentally and sometimes physically, and I think overall balance is important, but at times when you do push yourself very hard, you'll be really pleasantly surprised to see how much you can do and how far you can go. And you don't need to always be at that breaking point or at your limit, but even just to understand it will be a source of confidence and inner power for the future. And so those experiences really taught us how do you break down a really complex, ambiguous problem into clear work streams. What does blue sky thinking look like on a Monday morning at 10 a.m. And that sort of relates to one of my favorite expressions. And I'm sorry that it's maybe not the most vegan friendly, but don't take it literally. And that's how do you eat an elephant? And it's bite by bite. And I really believe that. I think that we all live that in some way every day. So then I had this odd experience, and during one of our cases, and consulting, you're generally assigned to a company for a 3-month case. So one of our cases, we were working, and I had my philosophy background, but I was very, very happy not just talking about ethics. And we were doing an analysis about whether one company should acquire another company. And we were brought on by a board member of the company that wanted to acquire the other. And he was set on using our casework as a way of convincing the others that other board members that this transaction should go through. So we worked around the clock and came up with an analysis that was very sound, and it said, acquire this company. It won't be profitable or cash flow positive for 2 years, but on the 3rd year, it will be. So go for it, because from then on, it'll be long-term the right thing to do. Well, he was so convinced that we had to say from the 1st year it would be positive that he made us change our assumptions. And as a mere analyst, I wasn't able to sort of counter that. But I was so shocked. And that's really when I realized that numbers tell a story and that you need to understand what, it doesn't always need to be financial, but what numerical analysis is going on is impacting the decisions that are either you're making or that are around you. So then I went to get my Master's of Finance so that no one could ever pull the wool over my eyes and sort of change assumptions, because I could question them. And I think questioning things is so important. So I got my Master's of Finance from the University of Cambridge and really learned how to understand stories through numbers. And that's really why I've got this matrix image where sometimes numbers, if you look at it, it looks like complete nonsense, but try and decode it and try and get them on your side and not be intimidated by them. And so from there, and also just don't assume that the learning is over when you get out of college. For me, it's been quite the contrary. And then after learning how to lean into that fear and turn it from a weakness to a strength, then I worked in venture capital and in investment and operations, building different teams and systems, mostly in Europe. And after MBA, I got married, and that so far has been probably one of the biggest game changers for me. So we can all trade notes later about how that changes your time equation. So that's a little bit about my career and my experience to date. But I've learned quite a few things in my role as CEO, and I'd love to share them. So here we go. What does CEO mean? A lot of people talk about CEO, but they don't ever really describe the day-to-day. So I've learned that CEO means Chief Engagement Officer, Chief Everything Officer, and Chief Exhaustion Officer. But let's be honest that everyone is balancing 120% full schedule. Special shout out and respect to all the working mothers. And if you want something done, you should give it to a busy person. You have to learn how to be effective in not just the work domain, but in the lifetime domain, and learn how to prioritize effectively. I think that's the biggest skill that we are all learning continuously and improving upon, because it's always so dynamic. So from the day-to-day basis, this is what I've learned. Essentially, as a CEO, you need to set the strategic vision. What is our blue sky thinking? How do I motivate the team? How do I set the culture of the company? It's far more multidisciplinary than you would think, as you always need to lean into the weakest area, no matter the discipline or domain. So if production has an issue, I need to understand everything about it. If it's marketing, if it's sales, if it's finance, all of these realms, you need to be comfortable really getting hands-on and nitty-gritty. And in terms of the culture, to set the culture, you need to live the culture. It's important that you strive for something, for excellence. So if you want to have an entrepreneurial culture, for example, you need to first show how you can do it yourself and then enable the systems for everyone around you to do it. If you want to have a culture that values hard working, you need to be the hardest working. You need to be the first in and last out, even if it's just for a time period. So that's also this Wonder Woman. We've got to try and be it. And then again, I can't say it enough. You need to know your numbers. Most decisions are driven by some sort of numerical analysis. Much of it's financial, but not all of it. So when your team is thinking, what SKUs do we keep? What markets do we go after? A lot of this is always supported by numbers. Again, turn the matrix gibber-jash into meaning, and find the story there. And then third, it's that it's not always peachy. You know, a lot of people think about even business travel as being some 1960s Aaron Slim photograph. And I can promise you that Newark at 4 a.m. does not quite look like the lady in the beautiful hair and the glamorous yellow dress. This is not Newark at 4 a.m. But, and it's going to be worth it. And it doesn't give you, striving doesn't give you a superficial happiness. Sometimes the contrary, but it can be deeply satisfying, and I think that it's well worth it. As a CEO, you need to make hard decisions, and if you're really trying to do something that 99% of people haven't done, don't expect it to be easy. I don't expect thriving as the remaining 1% of US shoe manufacturers to be easy, but I'm focused and dedicated on it. And I think if you have passion for something, it'll help you find the way of doing it well. And there's a lot of responsibility in roles, and I think that we all want more responsibility in life, but you also need to be realistic about what that means emotionally, and that you emotionally have to carry. So, for instance, I need to carry the risk of having the team, the brand, the history, the carrying forward manufacturing in Beaufort, my own career, and that's not even taking into account anything with family and friends. So you really have to steel yourself for this. I think that sort of emotional fortitude is as important as physical or mental. But we can all go on holiday once in a while and hopefully go swimming in a nice pool like that. So that's really about the day-to-day. And so I wanted to share a few tidbits about what have helped me along the way. First of all, find mentors. Mentors that have relevant experience and that care. Beware of any conflicts of interest that may happen, and really try and find some things that can be a win-win. Personally, I've always found it helps to have mentors within your organization and outside of the organization. There'll be times when you want to refer to either or both, depending at your life stage. And it really helps if you can respect their holistic life perspective and the balance that they've created in their life. And that will really help you be able to take their advice across realms, because again, a lot about the challenges about work are about juggling these realms of work and life in a very real and practical way. So life advice is always just as helpful, if not more, than business advice. And I think that organizations like 210 are an incredible resource to meet like-minded professionals and kind people who you can connect with and relate with. So I think that's critical. 2, know your organizational history, know your values and the status quo, how you operate and why you operate, but really have the courage to productively challenge it. That's how you continue to add depth. And just because your brand or your company isn't 100% sustainable or transparent in every single way, it doesn't mean that it can't be, or you can't make steps towards excellence. For example, when I joined the company, we were really focusing on Made in USA as just an emotional element to our partners and to our customers. And we really questioned why Made in USA? What does this mean for our universe? And then really by delving into it, we said, well, this means proximity. This means that things like drop ship, that auto replenishment can be done. So let's build out those systems to match capabilities and competitive advantages to our values. And I think if you have a brand, think, okay, well, what are our values? What is our history? What can we go deeper on? Can we ask, so what? And that will really help you develop a more sustainable business model in both senses of the word. Probably in an ethical, environmental way, but then also in a way that will keep the business in a virtuous circle for the long term. Number 3. So everyone knows about Steve Jobs' black turtleneck, and I enjoy a black turtleneck maybe a little bit in winter, but not every single day. So I'm not suggesting that we only wear black turtlenecks, but life and every day is full of so many different decisions that we need to make. If we can streamline them, we can generally save mind share and boost confidence. I think as a woman, having 3 brothers in reference to them, or maybe just as myself, I have a tendency to overthink things. So try and understand what decisions you can make and have a default position. And one practical thing that really helps me is if I enter a room and I don't know where to sit, I sit at the corner table. Something as simple as that. So, and then the 4th one is just don't be discouraged and pursue your blue skies. And if there's conversations that you think are genuinely win-win, go for them and try and have them. If it's only a conversation, if it's a conversation that's advantageous to just yourself, then maybe you don't need to pursue to the 10th time. But if it's something that's truly win-win and that you can be open and collaborative about, continue to pursue. And I've had conversations with people where I've tried to have it for 10 times, and on the 10th time we have the conversation, and that's the beginning of a strong partnership. But it takes humility, and it takes really a lack of ego to get there. And then I recently was talking with a woman who is a 5th generation CEO. She took over our family business and transformed it from a regional business to an international one, doubling in capacity, and really a remarkable woman. And what she said stuck in my head. Business is legal gambling. Every day you bet on yourself. And so it's important that you give yourself kudos for just walking to the office and just starting your day. And finally, I'm a big believer in positive karma. If you're a good person, good things will come your way. Likewise, if you're authentic or ethical, sustainable brand or company, good things will come your way in the long term. And that karma that applies to people applies to companies. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much, Sara. That was fantastic. I do know that we have had a few questions come through. At this time, if you have any more, I would ask that you start typing them up. In the meantime, though, Sara, I'm sorry, you and I were talking earlier, and you said something that I found to be very impactful. You know, there are always going to be teaching moments in our lives, and we are an organization that is extremely supportive of women. But it's also important to know that there are teaching moments for men in our lives, and we need to work very collaboratively with the men in this profession as well. And tell me about that moment where you had a teaching moment with a male colleague.
So, for instance, when I was working in venture capital, I was part of a group, and it was really very heavily male dominated. I was the only member who was a woman on the investment side. And a man comes to me and she says, instead of hello, oh, you must be the new secretary. And I was a bit taken aback because, I mean, we don't even have secretaries in our organization, and it was just a bit of a funny interaction. So instead of saying, why would you presume because I'm a gender I would fill a certain role, and sort of exploding into his face, I said, well, you know, I know that you might be a little bit embarrassed right now, but let me tell you about what I'm doing. And I think that using these types of moments where maybe we feel personally really disappointed in a situation or embarrassed or something like that, but is to use Judo. So use the energy that's coming at you, and don't necessarily force back with equal energy, but flip it on itself and find a way that you can say, well, no, that's not the case, but let me tell you about something else. So I think that sort of idea of Judo in these awkward situations is definitely more powerful than just boxing back for the long term.
Fantastic advice. So we have a question here. Does Okabashi manufacture private label for emerging designers? If so, what's the MOQ?
So we've got both turnkey private label, and then we also do contract manufacturing. Contract manufacturing is slightly higher investment for custom molds, so that can really be in the tens of thousands of dollars. But for turnkey, 150 per minimum.
Great. Okay. And do you find it helpful to have a mentor outside of your organization and even a different industry?
Definitely. I think the more people who care and can meaningfully contribute, the better. And sometimes if it's a challenge about work-life balance, that's not going to be something that's necessarily only footwear related. Anyone who has had a similar situation in a different industry can relate to that and can offer you sage advice. I think that, or even within certain different functions, there are a lot of patterns in business. So it doesn't necessarily need to be someone just in footwear by any means. It's really more important that it's someone who you respect and who's also interested in helping you.
And as a follow-up to that, is there a mentor, is there someone that you can speak of quickly who has been a mentor to you, either in or out of this industry?
Yes, I've met through 210. I've really met some really remarkable women within footwear that I'm most grateful for. But even without, when I started my role, there was so much, and there is always so much to learn. And I had a mentor come and spend 100 hours with me to understand all of the proper inventory analyses. And for someone, he's a retired gentleman who's been in apparel manufacturing, and for him to come and spend 100 hours really getting his hands dirty was remarkable, and it really just inspires me to think how good people are, and people care about people.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Where do you want to see Okabashi's product line, in 5 years?
I guess where in terms of product and development, I really want us to continue to offer American-made quality and comfort at accessible prices. A lot of the Okabashi models are under $20, and so when a lot of people think made in America, they think a $500 shoe. And so we're really trying to turn that on its head and really continue to build on all of these years of manufacturing comfortable shoes to continue to have to drive on that. And then internally, our mission is to become the most recommended comfort footwear brand. Mm-hmm. Blue skies indeed.
And what country, if you're able to share this, do you purchase your bio-based soy material from?
Sure. All of our material is made in USA as well. So that is very amendment compliant and Prop 65 compliant. And I think that goes back to this transparency. And when you know everything that's in your material, it's much easier to be transparent. And so you can set up your systems where you don't see transparency as a risk, but just of the nature of doing business. So I think it's made somewhere in the Midwest. That's where the soy is from.
Excellent. And we'll just take one or two more questions. If anybody else has any last-minute questions they'd like to type, please feel free. How much of your business is direct to consumer versus wholesale, would you say, from a percentage breakdown?
About 20% of it is consumer and 80% of it is wholesale. We really value our wholesale partners, and I think that with the shift that's happening in retail now, it's not a shift away from retail, it's just a shift towards experiential, towards finding more meaning.
Great. And then lastly, how do you get your message of sustainability out to your customers? How do you shout your message from the rooftops?
So I think that this is a difficult conversation, and it's been one that I've been having with other footwear brands and just general apparel brands, comparing notes. Sustainability is such a complex topic, even if it's just on the environmental front. So if you have something that, let's say, has low carbon footprint and zero waste and closed loop recycling, a consumer doesn't necessarily, especially in today's landscape, have the attention span to understand every single element in nuance. So you have to just choose some element, have an openness behind it to generate that trust, but really specify one thing. So what we've done is, in our different brands, we specify different aspects of sustainability. So Third Oak, for example, is really, we talk about the closed loop process a lot. We talk about the material a lot, because this is for a consumer who's really looking for a product that's good for them and good for the planet. On Okabashi, we don't really emphasize it that much at all. A lot of people really buy and enjoy our shoes and are super fans because of the comfort. So just because you're sustainable doesn't mean that sustainability needs to be the front message in your brand story.
Great. Excellent. And then I do have one final question from Savannah. Thank you. How do you measure the success of sustainability initiatives, specifically the consumer closed loop shoe return system you created? Are you targeting any other circular economy initiatives?
So we can measure it in terms of the shoes coming back, and we can also measure it in terms of the awareness generated about the concept. I think that consumers have come so far from the year 2000 to where we are now, but I think that there is still a lot of education that can be done around what closed loop can mean, and is it possible for other industries, as you say. We're really focusing right now on our own program. We've been talking with different nonprofits within the space as well, and different retailers as well. But we really are focusing on that core competency.
Great. Well, thank you all so much for joining. Sara Irvani, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
Absolutely. Thank you. Your knowledge has been fabulous. I hope that you were all able to gain something from this past hour. We will have another Lunch and Learn scheduled for October. We're firming up details for that, so please be on the lookout from communication. And we have recorded this section, so it will be available within the next 48 hours if you would like to revisit it, or you have anyone, any colleagues or friends who you would like to have it, them hear it. So thank you all again, and I wish you a wonderful rest of your day. Done?